Today's a bit of an interesting day because this is the first time I have ever printed anything in ABS. Now, this is my Benchy, and for the most part, it did a pretty good job with just some general settings that I haven't really tweaked yet. I can clearly do some better settings with the parts cooling fan and overhangs. In fact, this was printed with no parts cooling from this fan whatsoever. That was an accident. I thought I had some parts cooling settings in Cura, but apparently I did not. Nevertheless, things came out respectably. And man, it's actually quite impressive. I don't see this warping issue people are talking about. That being said, it's probably because I'm using an enclosure, because you really should be with ABS. If ABS cools too rapidly, such as when you print on the surface, it is 250 degrees Celsius in this case, and the room is definitely not 250 degrees Celsius. It is closer to 25 degrees Celsius, at least ambiently. So that is a very rapid cooling for plastic, well, ABS in this case. ABS doesn't like that, and what happens is when you heat things up, they expand, and when you cool them down, they contract, and that contraction can cause the edges to contract and then slip, kind of pull up and warp up off the surface of the bed. You don't want that, so in order to do that, you have to regulate the temperature that you're printing in, and that's where enclosures come in. But that's not really the subject matter of this video, because we're going to be talking about something much more common. PLA. One thing I did not like when I saw the Ender 3 V2 come out is that it had plastic belt tensioners. I had known from videos that I've seen on the internet that when you print a belt tensioner, especially in something like PLA, that is a component that is under load. Problem with that is the same problem I had with this, and this really wasn't under load. At least not the way I see it. So, the glass transition temperature of PLA is somewhere around 50 to 60 degrees Celsius, which the ambient temperature inside of this enclosure can get upwards of 100 degrees Celsius, depending more or less on the temperature you set the bed at. The bed is really what radiates the heat, and then this special material reflects that heat, and then it builds up. But it'll never get hotter than the hottest component in the enclosure, which is in this case going to be the bed, because despite the fact that the hot end gets much hotter, it's a very small concentrated area that's not really radiating outwards, and a lot of that heat is being transferred to the plastic. What really is creating the heat is just the radiation of heat from the bed. So you can basically expect the ambient air temperature to be about the same temperature as your build surface. For this particular plastic, that was 90 degrees Celsius, although I did preheat the oven, so to speak, at 100 degrees Celsius for about 15 minutes before I started printing, because I wanted to have a controlled air temperature inside of the enclosure before I started printing. That's where PLA has a problem, because that is well above that glass transition temperature of PLA. And as you can see, it started to warp, kind of melting a little bit. Now, I paused the print and had to move my ABL further up, because if I didn't, that ABL probe would be hitting the stuff that it's printing, or the stuff that's printing right next to it as it prints. As you can see, it ain't much higher than the nozzle. In fact, it might even be lower than the nozzle at this point. Oh, that's hilarious. So, point I'm trying to make is, if you're going to print in an enclosure, at a minimum, you're really going to need to use something like PETG, or perhaps ABS itself. Now that is the quandary, is how do you print an ABS part without warping if you don't have ABS parts to start with? Well, you start with one good PLA part. And you make the same thing out of ABS right after that. And basically, now that I know that this is going to happen regardless of it not being really a load-bearing part, I am going to have to print that in ABS, as well as any other plastic components. I've been using this right here on my Bowden coupler. Someone brought this up to me to prevent slipping on the Bowden tube, and holy crap, this thing works so well. Props to the dude who designed this. This works better than any pneumatic coupler I've ever used. But that will probably be made in ABS as well. And point is, once you go in an enclosure, get yourself some good ABS. This is Overture Black ABS, and I'm very impressed with it. First time ever, no real tuning. Could definitely stand to put the parts cooling fan on this time, but yeah, base settings, man. That's pretty good.